welcome back to Anime Paint Night, the last one of the year. For this month, we have Saber from the Fate series, yes, or King Arthur, as we should say. So, inside the kit, you'll have the line art, the reference sheet, a watercolor kit if you ask for it, with a paintbrush inside. Make sure you get some paper towels, and make sure you've got some water, and then we should be good to go. See you soon! But the first thing, as per usual with most of our anime paint nights, we're going to start with the skin tone. I think there's only one part of her that you can actually do this at, and it's going to be the face. So we're going to go for the brown, and I have a little bit of highlights under, like on the bottom lip as well, so I'm trying not to paint too much on that. Make sure you are generous with the water, not too much pigment, so we can try to make the skin tone as accurately as we can. She's fair skinned, right? But I would say that she still has pigment. So that's why I always like to make sure that we add a little bit of color, just to make sure that once the paint actually dries, we're actually able to have a little bit of contrast between the actual areas of her skin that would be like light and stuff, especially like the eyes. So, that said, let's move on to our next portion. For our second portion, we're just gonna go right for the most dominant color in this piece. It's going to be blue. I would say Saber's colors are broken down to primarily blue, yellow, white, and the hint of green in certain areas. But definitely the blues and the yellows are pretty much the most dominant. So we're just going to go for the blue, start with the sleeves, and then work in the back. So now, while we're doing the blues here, let's talk a little bit about the Fate series. So the Fate series is so vast when it comes to the topic of how you can experience the story. Not only are there like light novels and manga, there's the anime. Of course there's an anime, right? It's Anime Paint Night. But there's also video games of various types. Then we also have mobile games. There's a lot of ways to experience the story of Fate. So there's multiple anime, and also multiple anime. The first time I ever got introduced to the Fate series was through Fate Zero, which is, I think, a very good starting point if you're trying to understand what on earth is all this about and such. And it does feature our young lady Saber over here. I don't want to spoil too much and stuff like that, or spoil anything, to be perfectly honest. But one thing that is commonly known, this is common knowledge about Saber. Saber is from the time of like the Knights of the Round and stuff like that. And wouldn't you believe it, Saber is actually King Arthur, where she comes from. She, does not reveal that she is a woman, lest she not be in power, lest she lose her life and such. But under the guise of being a different gender, she actually is able to lead her people and her country to many victories. In the Fate series, there is, I think it's called the Holy Grail War. And basically, that translates to regular, everyday people getting roped into essentially a game is a it's a huge stretch to say the word game, but a game where we pull multiple different people from history, from their time, the actual people, and they get brought to our time in the modern day. And our respective representatives in the modern day are given one of these heroes to compete with in this war, or this game. It's called, Holy Grail War, but yeah, it gets pretty dicey. There's definitely some betrayals and some characters that we probably wish we'd never get introduced to at all, but also some really fascinating backstories, and even a little pieces and bits of history from these actual people who existed in our reality and stuff. And seeing them in their anime way is really cool. Here's the crux though, right? I said her name is Saber, right? That's not her actual name. We just called her King Arthur just now, right? The game turns the historical characters into basic archetypes like Berserker, Lancer, Saber, Caster, essentially relegating them to like different job classes that you might find in Final Fantasy or in D&D. And you get your name. I think the one who gets their name is like the winner. We'll talk a little bit more in our next section, but you're looking good. Let's move on. We're going to move on to the other dominant color. We're actually going to move on to our yellow. So we're going to look at our different areas here that might need it, and it's usually the accents that are going to be utilizing this. We're not, just a disclaimer, we're not going to go for the hair just yet. I'm going to save that for last, for our anime paint night tradition and such. But yeah, we're just going to go ahead and use it on the accents here. There's going to be one specific portion of our yellowing that's going to be not necessarily an accent, but a genuinely main part of the piece and stuff, but we'll get to that. But for those of you who are familiar about the Fate series, if you are, there's actually different versions of Saber. There are versions of Saber where she's genuinely known to be the leader of her people, and they know full well that she is a woman. There is versions of her that are darker and stuff like that, I think Saber Alter or what have you. And then there's also side games like Fate Extella, which introduce a different version of Saber that's red, but I don't know if it's actually Saber. I don't think it's actually Saber. I think it's a different name, but we could go on. There's many different types. She is probably one of the most popular characters from that series, if not the most popular person from that series. And one of her defining features that makes her so popular is her sword, and the sword is Excalibur. Yes, the legendary sword of the Knights of the Round Table kind of stuff, you know what I mean? So it is yellow, most certainly, but fun fact, right? Fun fact, it's invisible when she's actually first using it and stuff. It is invisible, and I think that is super cool. And the only time it gets you actually get to see it is when she awakens her power and stuff like that. It's so cool. I think it's really cool. And there's a game called Melty Blood Type Lumina, right? And they actually brought Saber into the video game, and she actually has an invisible sword for the majority of when you're playing her as a character against people, which is so nuts because you can't see when it's gonna hit you. So I don't know how that's how they managed to make that fair, but they did. I promise. But yeah, super cool. Highly recommend Fate Zero, the manga, and Fate, the manga of Fate Zero and the anime of Fate Zero. They're pretty good, but there are some tough scenes. So just be aware. We're adults and older teens here, so just be mindful, okay? That's your friendly neighborhood disclaimer. Let's move on to our next section. So for our next section here, we're going to not go for the hair just yet. We're actually going to do the metal, gauntlets that she's got on, and a little bit of the armor. But as you can see, they're white and stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to go for the black, and we're actually going to add a little bit of accents and shading, just to make sure that it stands out. We don't necessarily need to just have it just be pure white and then that's it. If we want to make sure it stands out proper, the majority will be white, but the shadowing of where, like, you know, the light's going to be coming from really helps and stuff. So I'm going to mainly focus on the edges of where we have the gauntlets and stuff like that, but not nearly the whole thing, like barely. And then after the gauntlets, we'll move over to the armor that we've got here. And so again, just mainly focusing on the lines and the edges. Not even all the lines and edges, just some. Just a little bit. Like underneath the armpit will be covered by, you know, the sleeve and stuff like that, you know. Then we're moving on to the side. On the side, she's got some interesting armor plates near her hip. One of the reasons why I like Saber's design so much is that, like, it does genuinely look like she is wearing, like, armor that she should be using in combat. I know sometimes in anime and other forms of media, they don't give women, like respectful, safe, realistic armor and stuff. So I think they do a very good balance with having Saber be in armor, but also in, like, royal garb. I think it's really cool. So this under part of, I guess, like the dress she's wearing, I guess. But anyway, yes, that's what we're going to go for right there. And then after that, we're going to go and use that same, like, black that we're using for the shading. And we're going to add a little bit of shading to the inner parts of the bow and stuff. But with that being said, let's move on to our next section. The time is here, almost here at least. We're going to be working on the hair soon. But before we do that, we're going to do the eyes. So Saber's eyes are, like, very, very green, or like aqua and such. So you can go ahead and take the, I know it looks like darker than the other green, but go for the darker pigmented green, and it actually creates a pigment that's, like, more accurate to her eye. You can add a little bit of blue if you want to, because it is aqua, but I think the green just, like, is very sufficient. And then after that, the hilt of the sword, right underneath the hilt, there's a little bit of yellow that we're going to add to it. Yep, there we go. And now, finally, we're going to do Saber's hair. Now, Saber's hair is most certainly blonde and such, so you can feel free to be as generous as you want with the yellow. It's totally fine. We'll add some depth through the shading later on. Don't forget the eyebrows. And I know stylistically I have the eyebrows going literally above the hair. That's a stylistic choice. You see it sometimes in anime, and I'm gonna stick with it. I'm fine with it. I think it was nice. Anyway, I actually really like how this picture turned out. I used the sprite, which is the series of pixels that they use to create the character in the fighting game that Saber's in, Melty Blood. I used a pose that she had there in conjunction with like the actual character art that she has. And so I changed up the pose a little bit. In the original pose, the sword is much lower, and both her hands are like actively like gripping onto it. And she's turned in a way that's like, you don't really get to see too many details. I kind of like the fact that we don't have to have an exorbitant amount of details to really capture the fact that she is who she is. She's Saber. So I definitely altered where the sword was, though, to make sure that we can actually see the sword, so it's a part of the picture. Pretty much outside of that, I just changed the hand placement of the right arm back there, and then that's pretty much it. So I really like how it turned out. It's very cool. Very cool. So next, we're going to add a little bit of shading. So get a little bit of black, do some specks, then get some yellow, and then we're going to actually follow the same path that you did originally with the yellow. And then you're going to have a little bit more like depth and stuff like that. So instead of it just being all the same yellow, adding a little bit of that darker stuff will give it a little bit more of a darker blonde feel in some of the edges. Just to like have lighting be a factor and stuff. I really wish I had thought about that when I had like you see how there's a little speck of white at the top of Saber's head. That's me attempting to add a little bit of shine, but that's okay. But pretty much that's it. But before we go, we're going to go back and add a little bit more details. Now, you don't necessarily have to do these details, but I always like talking about shading. Shading is a really important part of adding a little bit of depth to your piece. You don't have to, and sometimes it's a little bit hard, and sometimes you don't feel comfortable doing it because you're changing what you thought was already good. It's like, this looks good, I don't want to ruin it. And to be perfectly honest, sometimes actively fighting against that fear and trying to add that shading and other things that you'd like to add to your piece, it goes a long way. Experiment, try things. It's totally alright. And even if it doesn't look like what you're doing before, try to find the beauty in it either way, you know what I mean? And it teaches you a little bit of a lesson for it next time as well. Next, after I'm adding a little bit of shading here, I'm actually going to add an aura for the sword. It's going to be going for the green. While I do that, though, I really want to say thank you all so much for another wonderful year of Anime Paint Night. This is our last Anime Paint Night for the year. I hope you have a good holiday season going forward, and I really, really look forward to the next Anime Paint Nights that we have on the docket for January through April. I think you're going to like them, so I look forward to having you all again. Remember, you all are fantastic artists, and genuinely speaking, regardless of how you may feel about your artwork, and how you may feel like, oh, this is kind of easy or whatever, no, it's still your art. And I believe that as we do this, we can find the enjoyment and the beauty in our own work. So, thanks once again for keeping me company and joining me in our Anime Paint Night journey, and I look forward to our next time. So I will see you in January, everybody. Bye-bye now. Happy holidays.